Hello and welcome back to Stop and Go F1 for this, our driver ratings for the Belgian Grand Prix. A Grand Prix I very much enjoyed. My entire breakdown on it, and also for the F2 and the F3, which will happen this weekend. Go and check out all those videos on the channel. Before we get into this one, make sure you like and subscribe. And of course, a big shout out to our members, Dakota, the Joyous James, and Robin Myers as well. There, if you want to become a member, link is in the description. And on Friday, there'll be another driver rating video out, but it'll be the mid-season rankings. So we'll take all the scores we've given all year, add them all up, and rate our drivers from worst to best based on the rankings I've given so far this year. But that's enough rambling on about what's to come. Let's ramble on about the drivers this weekend, starting, as always, with our Haas lads and Kevin Magnussen. Not a great weekend for Haas. You know, they've had a little string of doing quite well. You know, Hulkenberg scoring 6th back-to-back. But this one to forget for Haas. So let's start with Kevin Magnussen. Pretty good race weekend for him, actually. Qualified 17th, ended up finishing in 14th. So an okay one for him. I'll give him a 7 there for Kevin Magnussen. Nico Hulkenberg, though, quite a bad weekend. Qualified 16th, would end up finishing 18th. So actually the last of all the drivers to finish, which is very un-Nico Hulkenberg. Struggled in qualifying as well, although there was a point towards the end where everyone was out on the track apart from him. But he did get a lap in the end, but still not great. I'm going to give him a 4. Next is Zhou Guanyu of Stick F1 Team Kick Sauber. He qualified dead last, but got promoted to 19th after Yuki Tsunoda's engine penalty. And then only did like 3 laps, and then it was a DNF. So not much to go off of at all. I'm going to give him a 3. And the reason it's a 3 and not a 2 is because the DNF wasn't his fault. If it had been his fault, it would have been a 2. But yeah, not much to go off of. A bad season for Zhou, continues to go very badly. The most interesting thing about Zhou's season in general this year is that due to a technicality, he is ahead of Bottas in the championship. But there is no way on this earth he has been the better driver. I think he got a good score in the Bahrain Grand Prix. I think he was like 12th or something. And then since then has just been dreadful. But because the Sauber is so bad, and neither Zhou or Bottas can score any points, the fact that Zhou has had a higher non-points finish means that he's ahead in the championship when he has been nowhere near the calibre of Bottas this year. Let's talk about Bottas, because he had a pretty good one. You know, it was mad. So he qualified 14th. He ended up finishing in 15th place. But for near the end of the race, he was in the points. He was 10th. And then he had to take a pit stop at the end. Obviously, that was the strategy that he had. But you've got to think, maybe, could he have kind of held onto those tyres? Realistically, he would have had to finish 11th due to George's disqualification. Could Bottas finally have scored points in that car? It's looking like they're going to finish the season with 0 points, which will be the first time that has happened since Haas in 2021. We've had a few years now of all the teams scoring points, but this car is dreadful. And I really, really hope that this is not the end of Bottas' career, because that is not deserved. I really think he deserves much better than what he's getting here. I'm going to give him a 7 for this race weekend, though. Thought he did pretty well. Hopefully, brighter things to come in the future of everyone's favourite Finn, Valtteri Bottas. Up next, Yuki Tsunoda. Always an uphill battle for Yuki this weekend. 60 place grid penalty before the start of the race weekend anyway. He qualified 18th, which I was expecting a bit better from him, if I'm being honest, but I don't know if it's with him, you know, you're going to go into that race weekend going, I'm starting from the back anyway, why would I put my all into this qualifying session? So he qualifies 18th, ends up at the back of the grid, as we all already knew. In the race itself, ended up finishing up in 16th place. I think, realistically, he wasn't expecting much this weekend at all. I'm going to give him a 7 because I just am. Not much explanation for this one. I just think he did an okay job with what he was given. A very tough weekend, but there you go. Daniel Ricciardo had a much better weekend, but he didn't start dead last. He qualified 13th, ended up in 10th, getting a point for the team. I'm going to give him a 9 in what I believe is his last race weekend as a racing Bill. More on that later on. Here's Logan Sargent. He qualified 18th, finished in 17th. So, okay, I guess. He beats Hulkenberg on track, which is pretty good. But yeah, 17th still isn't fantastic. I'll give him... I don't bloody know. I'll give him a 6. I'm feeling generous, maybe. So a 6 for Logan Sargent. There you go. Alexander Albon had a bit of a better weekend for him. So he qualified 10th, would end up in 12th, was around the fight for that last points playing position, but couldn't make it in the end. I'll give him a 7. Esteban Ocon scored points, though. Let's talk about him now in the Alpine. They had a special Deadpool and Wolverine livery and helmet and race suit and all this kind of stuff. He qualified 9th, finished 9th. I mean, pretty good weekend for him there. I'm going to go with a 9 for Ocon. Scoring points is good. He got 2 points for the team. Well done, Esteban Ocon. Here's Pierre Gasly. He qualified 12th, finished in 13th. He made some good overtakes at points here, but ultimately for nothing. I'll give him a 7. So we talk about Lance Stroll in the Aston. He qualified 15th, would finish up in 11th in an Aston that's not looking too good at the minute. I thought he did a pretty good job, if I'm being honest with you. I've given it a lot of 7s, but I do feel like that is a 7 performance. So it's a 7, everyone. We've done it again. It's a 7. His teammate, though, Fernando Alonso, did a fantastic job. Really, really good. Qualified 8th, finished 8th. Realistically, the Aston cannot do better than that. Unless there's lots of DNFs further up the grid, that Aston is not getting better than 8th. It's just not good enough by far. So I'm going to give him a 10 because he got the best he could out of that car in both qualifying and the race. Fantastic job, Fernando. Hopefully, the Aston will be better next year because he deserves better. McLaren time now, and Oscar Piastri had a fantastic race. I was saying in my race review that this is the first race weekend I can remember where Oscar Piastri was better than Lando Norris in basically every aspect of the race. Still not perfect, and I'm going to give him a 9. He qualified 5th and ended up in P2. So it was a fantastic race from Oscar. It really, really was. One of his best, I think, if not his best race of his career. Really fantastic stuff. The reason it's not a 10, though, is because at the end, he was the fastest man on the track, apart from Perez, who pitted for fastest lap. So ignore Perez. Apart from Perez, he was the fastest man on track, doing fantastically well. And he was closing in on the 2 Mercedes, and closing in. And who knows? You can always do that thing. I don't like saying it, but, if there's a few more laps, who knows what would have happened? I think that's a load of rubbish, realistically, but who knows what would have happened? At the end of the day, he's a few tenths off the back of those Mercedes cars. But a few laps earlier, he pits, carries far too much speed in and hits the front jackman, and his pit stop is 2 seconds longer than it should have been. So, at the end, he's that close, but realistically, he should have been 2 seconds further up the track. And who knows, maybe that has cost him the win this weekend. So it can't be a perfect score, but it's close. It's a 9 out of 10 for Oscar Piastri. Good job. Lando Norris now. So he qualified 4th and finished 5th. Not a good weekend for Lando Norris. Made the mistake into turn 1 on lap 1, got all in the gravel trap, lost 3 positions, and then from there, just didn't really have anywhere near the pace that Oscar did, realistically. was not a great weekend for Lando Norris. And, people are discussing him in terms of like a championship battle. I think that McLaren could win the Constructors, but as for the drivers, I think that's also enough. I think Max is winning that. And especially in a race weekend like this one, where Max is starting 11th, and you have Lando starting 4th, and Lando is your closest rival to Max. And at the end of the race, Max is ahead of him. That's just not going to work. And, if you want to talk about title battles, I think we've had 14 races now, and Lando has outscored Max 4 times. And one of those was his DNF in Australia. So I think in terms of them both finishing races, Lando has outscored Max 3 times. So, you can say championship battle. I'm not going to. I don't think there's a championship battle here at all as it stands right now, and I think this is quite a disappointing race for Lando. I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10 because he really, really should have been better. Oscar showed him up in terms of pace. He made a mistake into turn 1, which is not the first time that has happened. He should have done a lot better than he did today. But there you go. Let's move on to Ferrari. Now, Ferrari was a surprise package of the weekend for me. They've had, realistically, no pace at all. They've been a solid 4th best team for the last few weekends. But this weekend, looking pretty good. Carlos Sainz qualified 7th and finished 6th, which I thought was a decent job. Another 7 out of 10 for Carlos Sainz. But the star for me was Charles Leclerc. Absolutely fantastic. So we got pole position after Max's engine penalty, which was out of nowhere. Did not see that lap coming at all for Charles, but he pulled it out and did really well. And in the end, he finished in P3. Fantastic stuff. I think, the likes of Lando Norris definitely should have beaten him. The McLaren was definitely faster than the Ferrari this weekend. The Red Bull realistically was faster than the Ferrari as well, but Max was starting from 11th and was right on him at the end. Perez should have beaten him, more on him in a second. But Charles Leclerc managed it really well. Great stuff. 10 out of 10. Really, really good. George Russell. Okie dokie. So, let's get the positives out of the way. This was George Russell's greatest ever race, and I will honestly say that. And I know people are going to go, oh, but he was disqualified and he's a dirty cheater. It's like, yes, he was disqualified. I don't think he necessarily cheated. I know that it's a weird one because, he broke the rules because his car was under the weight limit. But realistically, that wasn't cheating on purpose. It was just, it accidentally happened. This was George Russell's greatest ever race. He was absolutely fantastic here. He often goes for the one-stop strategy out of nowhere, and it never really works. And obviously, it didn't work here either because it cost him because of the disqualification. But it nearly worked. It was very close to working. And the way he managed the tyres to be in the position where he could actually defend at the end, despite having, 34 laps worth of tyre wear. I mean, he was absolutely fantastic, and realistically, it is a 10 out of 10. But also, there is a rule on this channel that if you get disqualified, you score 0. So, George Russell scores 0. Sorry, George. Here's Lewis Hamilton, though. He qualified 3rd, finished the race in P1. A fantastic start to get ahead of Checo at the start of the race. Then he chases down Leclerc, gets past him, controls quite a bit at the start of the race, loses it through the pit stops, then comes back to challenge George at the end. Ultimately was not able to beat George on track, but after the disqualification inherits P1, his 105th win. He gets a 10 out of 10. Fantastic stuff from Lewis Hamilton yet again. Here's Sergio Perez. Oh dear. So he qualifies P2 in a fantastic qualifying. I really thought he pulled it out and got pole position at the end, but Charles Leclerc gets a lap that was even better. But you think, here you go, Checo, this is your chance. There's almighty pressure on you here. You're starting in the front row. The Red Bull is faster than the Ferrari. Get a good start. Take the lead. And just really put yourself back out there in terms of the window and, make people look at you and go, yeah, come on, actually, he is all right, and he does have his time to shine. Ultimately, he finished 7th. Just not good enough at all. Beaten by Max, who started in 11th. Beaten by both Mercedes, who, Mercedes did have the fastest car this weekend, so you can't hold that against him realistically. Beaten by Charles Leclerc in a Ferrari, which was slower, but he was on a mad one. Beaten by both McLarens, including Lando, who didn't necessarily have the best race, but he still beat Sergio. Beaten by Carlos Sainz, who was in a slower car than Sergio by quite some margin. I mean, what are we doing here? This could be Sergio's last race at Red Bull. And the thing that hurts me the most about this is I love Sergio Perez. I really, really love him. He's one of my favourite drivers. I'll probably go into this a bit more if he does lose his seat, but I remember those halcyon days of 2012. Sergio Perez and Kamui Kobayashi in the Sauber. What a team that was. And then at the time, I was the biggest Jenson Button fan in the world. And to have Sergio Perez with Jenson Button in the McLaren was a dream come true that turned into a nightmare because the McLaren wasn't necessarily that good. And you see him go to Force India, and he just became the face of that team. He was absolutely fantastic. And it gets to the point in 2020 where you're like, he's going to lose his seat. But he's done so fantastically well. And he wins that Sakhir Grand Prix, and it's one of the happiest race wins of all time. He's so good, and you go, come on, Red Bull, give him the chance. And they gave him the chance, and he proved himself, and he won races again, and he helped out Max in the championship. And then it's all fallen away. And it's like, oh my God, Sergio, no. What has happened here? And you see this, you're on the front row, and you finish 7th in what you could argue was the 2nd or 3rd fastest car in the weekend. It's just like, oh my God. So, how do I score this then? He's got to have a few good points for that lap. The qualifying lap was very good. But then everything else was very bad. I'm going to give him a 4. I think that's quite generous, actually, but it is a 4. Let's talk about Max Verstappen. So, he was dominant in qualifying. A wet qualifying round Spa. I mean, you're not beating Max Verstappen there. He was absolutely fantastic. He was fastest in qualifying, but got pushed down to P11 due to the 10th-place engine penalty. But from there, had a pretty decent race. Going into turn 1, he was the world's safest man, just to make sure he survived. But from there, was able to gain 3 positions on the first lap. I thought his pace in the middle of the race wasn't too great. He seemed to struggle quite a bit. And then you had Lando all over him at that point, and he couldn't really catch the Ferrari, and he was struggling. Then from there, towards the end, he was pushing really hard and came home in 4th place. I'm going to give him an 8. I thought it was a decent race from Max. Some very good overtakes as well. But overall, I think it is an 8 out of 10 for Max Verstappen. There you go, everyone. Our driver ratings are done. So, highest scores go to Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, and Fernando Alonso. Lowest score is George Russell with that 0 out of 10 for the disqualification. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I will see you next time. Until then, have a good one. Goodbye.